Hey y'all. Today I'm tuning in to talk about why it is so important to stay safe and practice safe sex magic and how you can do that. So, a little background on what sex magic is: it's using erotic, sexual attraction, desire, energy. Also, energies such as like procreation energy, energy where you're using or thinking about genitals, stuff like that. Any of those magical, energetic dynamics that weave their way in and out of the sex that we have as humans or the sex that nature is having around us. That's kind of like the long and short of what sex magic is. And it can be practiced in so many different fun ways. And I wanted to talk about why so commonly you will see disclaimers and warnings on spells and articles about sex magic. I recently ran into an issue. I was making like a MailChimp landing page, which is something I do all the time. MailChimp is like a email service. And they banned my account because I said sex magic in the content of it. And they were like, "Oh, do you want to appeal?" I was like, "No, I do not want to appeal." And they asked like, "Oh, why are you canceling?" "Because you banned me." And they asked what they could do better. And I was like, "You could masturbate more." I like wrote, "You can masturbate more" in the like, "what can we do better" text box. So that's a tangent. But lately, I've also been making like TikTok videos. So I'm trying to self censor because their guidelines are crazy. So I've been saying like sex magic or SX magic. So if you've seen that published on my page, that's what that is. It's like a little censored version of sex magic because all of these delicate people online don't know how to stay safe around that energy, right? So, what a sidebar. So why do we say that it's so important to stay safe when practicing sex magic? Well, I think the first and most primary reason is that we have an idea about sex and sexuality that it is all about your connection with another person. It's all about you engaging in sex with a partner or a lover or someone that you're interested in or attracted to. It's really about like the carnal act of us having sex with one another. And that's not the boundaries of what sex actually is. That's, this one prescriptive method of sexual interaction that is really socially acceptable and very idolized and maybe a mechanism of control, right? Sometimes we catch a little psyop here and there, okay? Um, But the actual reality of sex is that it's much larger than just an interaction that you have with another person. It's also about how you engage with yourself around themes like eroticism, sexuality, sexual expression, all of the things that kind of occur if you're someone who follows like chakra type energy working. The energy centers of the root chakra and solar plexus, these are super sexy places, right? So if you're engaging with that kind of work, then you might start thinking about how sex magic can play into that. And if you feel those places like activated or clenched, or you're having a hard time, sacral is another one I don't think I said. But I mean, in my opinion, sex magic goes all the way everywhere. As some of you know who have been to some of my pleasure circles, we can go all the way from the bottom to all the way to the top. But we have this perception that it is like this lower chakra area, which is stuff around like attachment, grounding, self-expression, all of these things that get wounded around our like social relationships, particularly like things like early childhood development, adolescence, learning like the social norms of the world. Those things can be really wounding to those areas, right? So, all of that to say, there are definitely reasons why we get caught up in this idea that maybe there's like this a man with a dick and a woman with a vagina love each other very much and then they make a baby. That's not really, that's not sex, right? Sex is how nature continues to survive. Sex is how Mother Earth expresses and continues to evolve and interact with us, right? Sex is an emotional process, it's a physical activity, it is a way of connecting with others, but it's also a way of connecting with ourselves and connecting with nature. And so if we go into sex magic believing that it's going to be with another person, or that another person holds the key to us experiencing the kind of sex magic that we want to experience, we can reinforce old wounds. We can hurt other people. We can idolize and put people on a pedestal that don't really belong there. It can make it easier for those people to manipulate us if we do that. It can play into our feelings around porn addiction, sex addiction, any of our attachment issues that we have, like avoidant or anxious or unorganized attachment. Those things can get triggered when we're continually projecting sexual energy onto sexual partnership, right? So the reason it's important to stay safe is because us having those beliefs and not unpacking them can hurt ourselves and others. We can be like, whoops, I tripped into a really painful relationship or a painful parasocial relationship, right? And I can expand on that too if anyone has any questions, but now I want to talk about like actually protecting yourself magically. So not just making sure that you're being safe with others and yourself, like in the way that you perceptually, existentially define sex, right? Because those perceptions and those projections are already wreaking havoc on our society, right? So we know that they're harmful because they are tools, right, that are used to oppress and make us into oppressors of each other. But then there's this other part that's not as activism, not as like interacting with others, not as like of this world, that is more of the other world. Not only staying safe here on this planet, but as we start to explore other dimensions with our sexuality, we also are resting in things like our light body and our inner world and our psyche. And if we're into astral travel, maybe stuff like that. So what does protection look like in those contexts? Like when you actually do unpack your stuff around sex societally, and now you're having these amazing sex magic orgasms by yourself, like with your hands or with toys, right? You're in this deep, loving relationship with yourself where you can give yourself magical pleasure. You're using your orgasm to manifest. You feel really great in your body, not only when you're touching yourself, but in other places in your life. Once you start tiptoeing into that part of the SEX magic, that's when protection becomes a more embodied and magical experience. It's less about being responsible and ethical with other people because you are now training yourself to be responsible and ethical with yourself. So that means managing things like disassociation, managing things like obsession, things that are kind of like Neptunian, I would say. So if you're into planetary archetypes at all, like all of the things that are kind of Neptune-y, because, and this is just from personal experience because of my relationship with sex, I imagine, now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm imagining what it might be like for someone who has like a relationship with sex that's like super on this planet, like, because mine is really spacey, but for someone who has like a really earthy, like fiery relationship with like carnal sex, and they like the touching and stuff, they might go into a different place that's not as Neptunian, but is more like addiction, right? Like attachment to this planet, attachment to the pleasure. Neptune can have some addictive stuff, right? But so I guess what I'm really trying to say, and what's really coming up for me as I try to say it, is that everyone's going to have their own initiation into a world in which like sex and pleasure are a connection to the magic and to the divine. And it is just a doorway. Like once you reach that place, you have not explored the whole palace, because this window into the spirit world and into the divine and into a different way of conceiving of and participating in reality Like the door leads to this amazing labyrinth that each person walks through at their own pace and in their own way. And you know, you can do a protection spell, right? Anyone can do a protection spell. It's super easy. I'll teach you one if you want me to. Just drop it in the comments. You can do protection mantras. You can do protection affirmations. You can really solidify your boundaries, internal, external, stuff like that, which I'll get to kind of at the end. But my invitation as you start working with SEX Magic is to really feel what it feels like to have another life that doesn't feel like the 3D material reality, right? And what kind of like pitfalls and shadows might come up. I had a question in the comments recently, which I might do like a more expounding video on that, which is like, if you do sex magic, does shadow work always come up? And I want to say like, no, it's not required. You don't have to do it. It's not like it's going to come up all the time. But for a lot of us, like all the same stuff that gets triggered around our relationship with sexuality can get triggered around our relationship with magic, because magic is an act of creation, and so is often sex, right? It's not the only mechanism for creation, and that's not all that sex is. But, you know, magic is this really creative act that, you know, turns something very simple and basic on this planet into something super divine and miraculous. It's this transmutation. It's this really rich, deep part of our experience as human beings. That's true about both sex and magic, right? So any of the toxic shit that we have around sex, when we start doing sex magic, it really amplifies that. I know I can never say this enough, but if you haven't gotten a therapist yet, or some kind of counseling, some kind of support group, if you do have some like toxic stuff around sex or neglect, there are things like Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, which I think I might have I've gone to some of those. I do appreciate them a lot. It's so nice to hear from other people sharing. It makes me feel like I'm not alone. It's beautiful. And there may be other things in your life or in your childhood that you want to start unpacking as you kind of delve deeper into SEX magic. Because it's not that it brings forward the shadow, it's that it brings forward wisdom. And so we see things about ourselves that we have been like on autopilot about, that we now want to like really take control of and be an active participant in, and like feel the deep richness of how it contributed to our development as a human being, and what those wounds can do for us as we move forward in our magic. So all that shit is really triggering. So let's talk about, and if you want to talk about how to move through triggers, I would love to. Let me know. We can totally go in that direction too. But let's talk about like practical, like, hey, let me protect myself. So I'll tell you something. I'll tell you a secret about my sex magic journey. There was a time when I was doing a lot of like really delicious sex magic. And during that time, I would have sex with other people, and I would get psychic information from them that I did not ever want to see. I saw some things that I never want to see again. And it was a lesson. But I mean, looking back, that's something that I've always been able to do, but I didn't like notice that that's why I would have like this new feeling or new information about a person after we slept together. I just thought that like that's what everybody did, or that's like the side effect of sex. I mean, my moon is in Scorpio, like my Venus is in Scorpio, my Mars is in Cancer. Like, I'm sorry, y'all. I was psychicking you with my Sakusi. So after that, I started a stint of spiritual celibacy, which is something I recommend anybody who's doing sex magic try. Celibacy is your number one protection as a sex witch. You can define what celibacy looks like for you if you still want people to do other things to make you reach climax, if you still want to have other kinds of intimacy, if you want to just set boundaries in certain relationships around like touch, penetration, whatever feels right. Like celibacy is kind of like a sliding scale. It's not the same as abstinence, right? Abstinence is like abstaining. That's how I define it. I'm sure that people who have like written research papers about the two might have different opinions, but that's how I categorize them. And then you get a feel for what your energy feels like in the context of SEX magic. I would not jump into doing it with a partner right away. Here's the deal. Everybody finds their own path, right? It's not like you're going to get possessed by a demon or anything. It's just that it like is not as fun or good or productive to focus your own spiritual magical journey as a sovereign individual through someone else's body. Like, why? I mean, follow your bliss or whatever, but you'll see what I mean if you try it. If you try both, you'll know the difference. You'll know. So then we can talk about what it's like to protect yourself as an energy body and as a physical body. My recommendation is that you write down what feels good and what doesn't, or you take a mental note, or you make a little video about it, or you draw it, right? You paint it on your own body, even like marking paint on your body where touch feels really good. You can write down things on your own body or on a drawing or in a journal about what feels really good for you to explore and what emotions you have when you touch there. Really take like an erotic inventory. Oh my God. I'll make a little tutorial about that because that sounds really sweet and fun. So I'll do that and I'll post about it. But I really think that when it comes to thinking about sex magic, we kind of associate it with like things that are bad and wrong and deviant. So I sometimes sense like this judgment, like, oh, you have to be careful when you do sex magic because like sex summons the devil. And that's literally textbook like demonization of sexuality. Like that's really not what you're protecting yourself from. You're not protecting yourself from the fucking devil. You're protecting yourself from like the pain and guilt that comes with harming yourself and others. Like I know a lot of us have used sex as self-harm, like a lot of us. And I know a lot of us experience like a lot of problems with our ego and with our sense of self and our self-worth when we can't get sex the way that we think we're supposed to get sex, like getting laid, finding a date, having a partner to lay our heads next to. All of that stuff is like rough stuff. So we really want to protect our mind and our bodies in addition to protecting our space. Like put salt on your door, draw a protection sigil on your shower with soap, like get some protective stones and put them on your bedside table. Like really simple protection stuff. You know, everything helps when you're doing magic, but like sex magic is really not that crazy different than any other magic. I would argue it's like probably more potent for me because of my chart. I think it is kind of a level up from singing in the shower, but you can sing in the shower and touch yourself. And now it's like 3 times as strong, whatever you were doing. So that's my perspective on protection. You know, I like to come up here and write a novel. And if you have any questions, I love to hear from you in the comments. And I've been publishing a lot more stuff about practicing sex magic. And if you want to follow some of the content that I'm creating, you can check it out in the bio. I have a little snip feed where you can subscribe to my mailing list. I'm sending out maybe monthly. We'll see how it goes. Monthly newsletters about practicing SEX magic. So if you want to kind of start your journey, I'm dedicating my life to facilitating that for you. So you're welcome. And I'm excited. Okay, bye.